I'm happiest in the saddle.
A fellow sportsman.
I am an FBI agent!
Great Scott!
What do you say we cut the chit-chat? A-hole!
Dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria.
Come with me if you want to live.
Hello, and welcome to Retro Ramble. I'm Charlie McGee.
I'm George McGee.
And this time, dear listeners, we are going back to 1990 to revisit a very big film for George and I. It is Paul Verhoeven's 1990 sci-fi action classic that is Total Recall. Isn't that right, George?
Yes, indeed, Charlie. We're completing the Verhoeven sci-fi trilogy. So Starship Troopers was one of our very first podcasts. And then we did Robocop. And yes, as I say, we've done them in a jumbled order. But it's long overdue. It's safe to say that we're both very excited to be covering this film. It means a lot to us.
It's time for some more Arnie, one of our favorite heroes of the 80s and 90s and still today. It's got Sharon Stone, it's got Ronnie Cox, it's got our friend Michael Ironside, and one or two other character actors that we enjoy seeing in films over the years. So sit back and enjoy. We will try and do the film justice. We will touch on the books that this film's based on by Philip K. Dick, because since watching these films, this film especially as young boys, we've since grown up, read the books, and we now look at them slightly differently, and we're much more au fait to the world of Dick. Philip K. Dick, that is. So if you've listened to the episodes before, you know what to expect. For those who haven't, here's George with a quick reminder on some general housekeeping on what to expect.
Or should I say, housekeeping?
Hauser!
You blew my cover! So yes, Charlie and I are brothers. This is a light-hearted film podcast. So the whole purpose of this podcast is Charlie and I revisit the films of our youth. We look at what made them special. Do they still hold up? What have they go on to influence? And have they become a part of a franchise? Have they been rebooted, remade, inspired, etc.? And yeah, generally, do they still hold up? So along the way, there'll be trivia, there'll be some bad impressions. We're going deep into detail on these films, so there will be spoilers from the very off. And there will be swearing as well, especially as this is a Paul Verhoeven joint. It's going to get fruity.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you come to expect from the guy. Ooh, sexy space Nazis with Starship Troopers. This is mainly just impaling people with random rods, a little bit of boobs, maybe one extra boob here and there. But yeah, it's top quality Verhoeven. And this film was, I think, ahead of many other films that have come along recently and shocked audiences, and like The Matrix and Inception. This is still a little bit of a mindfuck today.
The greatest mindfuck yet, you could say.
Yeah. I think we will touch on that as well, without trying to lose ourselves.
Yes, we do try and make our way through a convoluted plot. So do bear with us, and obviously it's the film's open to interpretation, and this is our interpretation. So make of it what you will.
There are no correct answers.
Exactly, and even Paul Verhoeven says so. So sit back in a comfy chair at Recall and have a memory of a lifetime.
Once again, just bear with us on the audio quality. Obviously, we're still remote. This is lockdown restrictions. We'll clean it up the best we can. But yes, sit back and enjoy the Brothers McGee taking a retro ramble on Paul Verhoeven's 1990 classic, Total Recall.
Call recall for the memory of your ideal vacation.
You were interested in a memory of,
Mars.
You're gonna love this, Doug.
Yeah, but how real does it seem?
As real as any memory in your head. You are on your most important mission.
Do you want to know the future?
What about the past? You are not you. You're me.
They erased your identity and implanted a new one.
Watto wants what's in Quaid's head.
You're Koala, right?
Wrong.
If I'm not me, who the hell am I?
You wouldn't hurt me. We're married.
Consider that a divorce.
You got a lot of nerve showing your face around here.
Look who's talking. My name is not Quaid.
In an hour, he could have total recall.
I want Quaid delivered for reimplantation.
Get
ready for a surprise!
Kill them all! You think this is the real Quaid? It is.
We hope you enjoyed the ride.
Recoil? Recall. Insert the audio for the song.
Would you like to climb the mountains of Mars?
So, George, 1990s Total Recall. How did we get this film?
This film is quite well known for its drawn out film development. So I've got a lot to talk about. So I don't know, would you want to do first memories afterwards?
I think we should start with first memories because it's interesting that this film fell into our laps probably via the Glendinings or not. Maybe we were a bit older then. Maybe we were like 11.
Again, they're sort of a bit like an implanted.
It's an abyss,
or a dream. It kind of melds between watching this film at the Glendinings or our other good friends just around the corner, the Feenies as well. I probably have memories of watching it at both their houses.
Hauser, there you go.
Hauser,
again.
He's back.
You killed my cover.
Sorry.
I put this down. I think Jamie Feeney would have been well into this. The whole, let's put it simply, the whole mindfuck nature of this. But yeah, and I remember us being big fans. This was up there with Robocop. It was sci-fi. It was Arnie, and it was gory. So tick lots of boxes.
Well, that's it. It's quite funny that Paul Verhoeven is. On face value, it appeals to that sort of that teenage boy of, as you say, excessive gore, violence, swearing, and nudity.
Occasional nipple. It's moderate apparently, according to IMDb. There's moderate amounts of nudity.
There's a lot, yes. It's one of those things, and as we've talked about with both Starship Troopers and Robocop, that as you grow up and you watch it at the right age, you realize how it works on so many levels, how layered it is and how satirical it is. And that's the thing about this, that, on face value, it's just a really good action film, but scratch a little deeper and it's actually a very clever sci-fi film as well.
And I think, talking about first memories, we hooked onto this because it was an Arnie action film and we enjoyed it because it was sci-fi. And it's only now looking back that you're like, whoa, the sci-fi's up there with Blade Runner in some parts. Then there's the whole satire that you get normally with Paul Verhoeven, accosting society, just like he does in Robocop and Starship Troopers. And then there's the Philip K. Dick homage, which we will try not to get lost in our own way. But in terms of first memories, this film had enough to keep us coming back again and again. You and I both own this on, I know for a fact that we bought the limited edition on DVD, and I think I'm falling far. I didn't update it to Blu-ray. So I think I'll probably get it on, but it's a film that you're always going to have with you somewhere.
Yeah, well, they've just released in the past couple of months on a 4K remastered version, and apparently it's fantastic.
4K.
Is that what they call it in France?
What do you mean 4K?
I watched it. I bought the Blu-ray.
Kaka.
Cuckoo.
Kaka. It's not Kaka. It's good quality.
Bought it on Blu-ray a year or so ago, and I only actually got around to watching it because I've been holding off watching it for the podcast. And on my Blu-ray, it says, a remastered version overseen by Paul Verhoeven. And watching it on the projector, I was like, yeah, it's good, but it's a little bit grainy. So I'm thinking that the 4K, because everyone's saying it's phenomenal. I'm assuming they've done an even better remaster and they've really gone over it. But it's one of those things that you sort of like. We probably will happily watched it on video numerous times without talking about those reds could be a bit bolder.
I don't think we were watching recorded off TV versions when we were younger. this film has stuck with us. We're excited to go back to it and do Retro Ramble. So, George, how did we get this film? Take us through the production of it.
I'm putting on the glasses.
Putting on his glasses right now.
Literally putting on the glasses. So yeah, this film has quite a drawn out production history, and I don't think I really knew about it. I think, it's one of those things that you read so much on, if you're a film fan, you read quite a bit on the IMDb trivia, and you don't know, how much of it, as everyone says, take with a pinch of salt. But yeah, I read a fantastic book last year called Tales from Development Hell by David Hughes, and I would recommend it to any film fan. He's got some fantastic insights into a lot of the films that some of the films may have eventually made it to screen, and then there are some fantastic projects that got very close and never did. And all the sort of films that went through various different versions. So yeah, that's it's currently available on Amazon. I think it's only about $5, so I would really recommend people to pick it up. And there's a whole chapter dedicated to the production of Total Recall, but also the failed attempts to do a Total Recall sequel, which we'll cover in our Suspicious Spin-Offs feature later on. There's also worth checking out if you're after more sort of Total Recall trivia. Check out the Film Stories podcast by Simon Brew. He does a comparison piece. He always covers 2 films on his podcast in each episode, and he does a special on Total Recall where he does both the 1990 original and the 2012 remake. Interestingly, Total Recall starts with scriptwriter Ron Shusett, and he bought the rights to the Philip K. Dick short story all the way back in 1975. So before Blade Runner, which is interesting. Before, in Ron Shusett's words, before Philip K. Dick became a big deal. So he bought it, I think at the time it was published as the original short story, which is known as We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, was published, I think, in a sci-fi magazine, as it was the style at the time. And so yeah. Magazine. What's a magazine? So yeah, he optioned it back in 1975, and he worked on a script idea. He was like, I love this story, I want to turn it into a movie, but it'll be really expensive. And he worked on it with his friend, who's another scriptwriter, a guy called Dan O'Bannon, and they really struggled with the third act. I don't know, how good ironically, how good your memory is of the Philip K. Dick short story, but it's a short story.
Remind, could you implant a memory in my head, please? Because I can't seem to. It's been blocked out. You blew my cover. Sorry. Yeah, essentially, I vaguely remember the short story, and they sort of say the same thing. The short story just ends abruptly, as short stories do, and especially Philip K. Dick short stories do.
But which is the one that diverts? Because we obviously, George and I've read, we got seriously into Dick. Philip K. Dick, and we read all of his books.
Got deep into Dick. What? No,
thick with Dick. Thick. But we read. We told you we're going to be juvenile. No. So we read all of his books, and there's Minority Report, which I think is called Minority Report. There's Do Electric Sheep Have Dreams or something along those lines, and We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. So which is the one that is quite different? Is Total Recall quite different?
No, Total Recall, the premise is the same in terms of the setup of the guy that he lives a very boring life, and he wants to go on holiday to Mars. And it turns out that he's already been to Mars, and he actually has a completely different persona, and it's something about him averting aliens invading Earth, that they've agreed to not invade Earth whilst he's alive. And that's the sort of the big twist is but I was a different person all along. So it's basically the first half of the film essentially, and then it just ends on it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger.
But the fact is, whether it's in that particular story of Philip K. Dick's, we can remember it for you wholesale. There's so much of Philip K. Dick's work was dedicated to paranoia, dreams, reality, a lot of things that have been covered in things like The Matrix, Inception. Take your pick. It's why we jump onto those things like we would religion, because you can't prove it one way or the other. So people are intrigued by it.
I'm just trying to think if we covered any Philip K. Dick already.
Because Starship Troopers isn't by Philip K. Dick.
That's Robert Heinlein. But no, as you say, the thing with Dick, he was a very, and I don't know if we have talked about it in the podcast before, but he's a brilliant sci-fi writer. But there's some very crazy ideas. The guy was on, I think, a lot of drugs. There was A
Scanner Darkly.
Yes, A Scanner Darkly is a fantastic, and I think that's apparently one of the most faithful adaptations of his work. Obviously, The Man in the High Castle.
That's completely nuts.
Yeah,
The Man in the High Castle, which is
he had there was a lot of paranoia that some of it might be drug induced. His mental health might not have been properly there, but he was a fantastic writer.
Love him.
And all about the sort of whole perception of reality, memory. So they loved this story, Ron Shusett and Dan O'Bannon, but they were struggling to find a third act because the short story, being a short story, didn't have a third act. So they got a bit bogged down and bored, and they went off and wrote another sci-fi script called Star Beast, which ended up becoming a film called Alien. So that's what they did in the late 70s. And then a few years later, they Ron Shusett worked on the script again and sold it to the De Laurentiis Entertainment Group. So Dino De Laurentiis is a very famous film producer. He's been he was around pretty much for 50, 60 years. He did loads of stuff, but DEG, the De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, they were set up sort of around the 80s, and they made stuff. So he'd worked with Arnie already with Raw Deal. They did Evil Dead 2, Near Dark, and I also talked about DEG because they also produced Bill and Ted, but they produced Bill and Ted and then they went bust during Bill and Ted's production. Remember I said Bill and Ted sat on the shelf?
Bill and Ted killed them.
Bill and Ted killed them and went back in time for some reason. But no, so the DEG went bust toward, I think it was around 1987, and that's why Bill and Ted sat on the shelf for a year until another production came in and picked it up and finished it off. But so Ron Shusett sold the script to DEG. They brought on board David Cronenberg. So obviously David Cronenberg is, a lot of people, he does some very weird...
Shit's going to get weird.
Weird and wonderful films. And he went away and he worked on the script. He basically took Ron Shusett's script and worked up his own version, and he basically secluded himself for a year, and he admits that he did 12 drafts of the script before he then went back to Ron Shusett and Dino De Laurentiis and was like, okay, here's my script. And they had massive difference of opinion. Ron Shusett was like, you know what you've done? You've done the Philip K. Dick version. And Cronenberg was like, well, isn't that the point? And he was like, no, we want to do Raiders of the Lost Ark Goes to Mars. So I don't know if they
wanted more fun and pulpy sort of, easily to consume fodder.
Yeah, and I don't know if this was a reaction to, because obviously this had happened since Blade Runner. So Blade Runner came out 1981, I think. And Blade Runner, a lot of people failed to remember, was a flop when it came out, and everyone said
people found it too confusing, too stylized,
and depressing as well. It was slow, depressing, confusing, and I think that might have been a reaction to
lots of rain,
a lot of rain. But I think that might have been part of that sort of whole Indiana Jones Goes to Mars, is that, okay, let's make it a different Philip K. Dick. Let's try and make it fun and engaging. So
what people were hoping Blade Runner would be, let's make that film, because Blade Runner wasn't that.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, I wouldn't describe Blade Runner, the Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, as a fun story, but yeah, I think they could just taking that learnings.
Yeah, but,
okay,
yeah, but George, it's not Indiana Jones Goes to Mars, okay?
Exactly. There's your elevator pitch. So obviously, Cronenberg was just like, well, screw you guys. Like,
I'm out.
He had a I wouldn't say it was like he had a fairly well-known lead actor already attached, and he developed the script with him as well. But both Cronenberg walked and the attached star did. But
you're going to talk about him later.
I will do in Cronenberg. But Cronenberg's script, interestingly, it really tapped into, as it was the Philip K. Dick version, it really tapped into that paranoia that Philip K. Dick's really well known for. And the stuff that Cronenberg added was, because I don't think in the story it really details, I don't think they actually go to Mars. I think it's sort of like, Quaid's like, I want to go to Mars, and then it's revealed he's already been to Mars, but you don't actually know.
It doesn't go. I remember that.
Take place.
It's all coming back.
Whereas in the Cronenberg version, he had Mars as like full of mutants, full of mutant camels, and it was all a very weird and dangerous place. And obviously, the stuff with the mutants carried over into the final draft. So he did have some influence on the project.
There is some Cronenberg in it.
So next up, after Cronenberg left, was an Aussie director who I've never heard of, but Bruce Beresford, who most famously did Driving Miss Daisy, and he found a new star, a big Hollywood star, and cast him, and they got as far as building sets in Australia when DEG around 1987 went bust. And it was like, okay, tear everything down. It's
what people don't realize, that films take, 300 people 2 years to make, and they don't always make it.
Well, that's it. I mean, on the Cronenberg version, they got as far as doing concept artwork. I think they even started getting as far as doing designing costumes, and then that, I say that fell apart. But yeah, with the Beresford version, they were building sets in Australia, and that were eventually torn down.
You mean they weren't used for Masters of the Universe? Chucking on the Masters of the Universe pile.
Add it to the list. You mean Cyborg. It was Cyborg that took all the Masters of the Universe sets and costumes. Yeah, that's there.
Nobody else can use them.
Sci-fi. It's fine.
I know.
So all this while, so I'd say Arnie has a relationship with Dino De Laurentiis, the famous producer. He's done Raw Deal with them. Basically one of Arnie's biggest hits was Conan the Barbarian. That was a De Laurentiis production, and so he was actually lobbying for the role with Dino De Laurentiis, and Dino De Laurentiis is like, no, forget about it. He's the character's he's an ordinary guy. He's not Arnold Schwarzenegger. So he kept fobbing off Arnie. And as soon as Arnie realized that DEG had gone bust, he convinced, having a relationship with Carol Co. So we've talked about them before. They've obviously produced loads of our favorite 80s hits. So yeah, they did Terminator 2, they did Rambo, they did Robocop, and a whole bunch. So Arnie had a relationship with them, and he basically said to Carol Co, he said, you need to buy this script and I'll star in it. So he convinced them to he wasn't the producer, they were the producer, but he's like, yeah, this is a great idea. I want to star in it, and you need to buy it. So they paid $3 million to buy the rights off DEG. Arnie had also been a huge fan of Robocop. So again, him having the sort of clout, he was like, and I want Paul Verhoeven. So they got Paul Verhoeven on board. Paul Verhoeven loved the idea, but didn't like the third act. So it seemed like nobody could agree on what happened in the end. So Verhoeven brought on his own writer, Gary Goldman, and I think we've talked about Gary Goldman in the past because he did he did work on Big Trouble in Little China, and he's also a bit of like Verhoeven's script doctor. I think Verhoeven's used him on a lot of projects over the past. But according to Verhoeven in the special features, when he came on board, there was 41 drafts to go through. So
scripts?
Yeah, so he basically said to Gary Goldman, he's like, here you go, Gary, here's 41 scripts, do your thing. And Gary Goldman...
Pick the best stuff.
Pick the best stuff. And Gary Goldman is a very modest bloke, and he's like, he will accredit, he's not like, oh yeah, it's all my idea. He's like, there was some really good stuff in there. I just had to make sense of it. And the stuff that I think he came up with was the latter stuff with... As soon as Quaid got to Mars, it was just all a straightforward action film. There was no tension. There was no real stakes. And I think there was hints of the Dr. Egmar sequence of the you're back at recall right now, Mr. Quaid.
Look, here's your wife.
Here's your beautiful wife. But I think he polished that scene up. And the other twist that Gary Goldman threw in that really makes this film what it is he came up with the whole Hauser twist, the fact that actually the person that Quaid's supposed to be is actually the bad guy.
Dick. I hate him.
Yeah. So that was the main sort of thing that Gary Goldman brought to it. But yeah, most of the scripts, I say, there was over 41 scripts, and they all start with Quaid visiting Recall, having altered memories, going to Mars. But there was one of them, and I think it was one of the original ideas from Ron Shusett, and I might be in the one that Dan O'Bannon was going for. Quaid was actually a human in alien disguise. So the aliens had destroyed the original Hauser and created this super being. And the reason he had altered memories is because he could see any danger coming, and that's why nobody could kill him. And when he put his hand on the device, he remembers everything and gets total recall. But everyone else was like, no, go for the more simpler Mars gets air. Just do that.
No, I think it must have been tempting to go so many different ways with this film. And he goes to Mars. What's on Mars? Anything we want. Anything. Mutants, reactors, million years old, alien civilizations. And what have we got running at present day? Well, corporate America.
Well, I say all the previous scripts and the short story, Quaid, or his original name I think was Quail, was a very unassuming accountant. And can you see me as an accountant? So they obviously had to fit it around Arnie's persona, so they turned him into a construction worker, and obviously they added in a lot of Arnie-isms, so a lot of the one-liners, and they lightened it. And as Verhoeven says, he's like, you can't, maybe with some of the other actors that were considered, you could have made a semi-serious sci-fi film, but as soon as Arnold enters the frame, it's a light, fun action picture. And yes, they can be some interesting ideas, but you've got to make it lighter and more accessible.
Because he's an unstoppable walking man mountain.
Well, that's it. There's the bit where he's drilling away, and you just see his fucking arms, and you see the veins popping and everything, and you're like, yeah, okay, he's a construction worker. I'm not a mild-mannered accountant. I am a bit like when he was considered for Stanley Goodspeed in The Rock. I am a chemical nerd.
With his biceps bulging out of every shirt. Yeah, no, I think he obviously brings something with him, but I think it's one of his career highlights as a result from from all of that work that went into the scripts, from his delivery, what he brought, his muscle, both his business muscle and his network muscle, as well as the two guns themselves. I think that's made it what it is.
Well, that's it. I said that there's so many run-of-the-mill sort of Arnie films. I mean, you look at Commando, and that is very much a predictable run-of-the-mill 80s action film.
You mean you're not on the edge of your seat wondering, is he actually going to get his daughter back throughout the entire film? Maybe he won't make it. Maybe Bennett will be stronger than him in the end fight.
Instead of questioning, where does Bennett get his wardrobe from? And obviously Predator, we've talked about Predator, that it's a men on a mission movie. It's quite clever in terms of, the the tension in it and them being stalked by it. So again, it's a bit of a twist on the traditional action movie.
And Arnie's not talking much. You know, he's very much a guy in a situation.
But if you think about it, this was the sort of towards the peak of Arnie's star persona. So I think this was prior. I don't know if he'd done Twins at this point, and obviously, you know, you sort of laugh at Twins, but Twins was that sort of thing that made him a bankable star. It's like, this guy can do anything. He can do action. He can do, you know, family comedies. But obviously, this is just a year before Terminator 2 as well, which basically, I think, you know, Time made him the biggest movie star on the planet. So this was sort of that boost. And you think about, like, this was one of the biggest hits, or if not the biggest hit of the year. Like, it's a massively violent and over the top, and, you know, it is, you know,
those were the days. Those were the days.
Yeah. I was the final thing in terms of, so I say originally it was set up, I think. It had been set up to film in Rome with David Cronenberg, and then it was filming in Australia with Bruce Beresford. But then filming moved to Mexico City because apparently the futuristic architecture they have there. So they had 500 people working across 45 sets over 8 sound stages for 6 months. And at the time, Total Recall was the second most expensive film in history, next to Rambo 3. Which I wouldn't have pinned as
but didn't it get... It got a ton of awards. I think the only awards it got were for all the visual effects. But I mean, it got noticed for that. But I don't know. Just throughout the amount of violence, I think it's great. I say war, it's fantastic. No, but I mean, it just, for me, it harkens back to a day where it wasn't all the time. It's like, now it feels like if you go and watch a violent film, there'll be violence and blood and gore throughout. Whereas back then you'd have, it's the occasional flash. I don't know if the BBFC or whoever, you know, have changed their game or got more, they've got more ratings now. So there's less space. Back then there was only PG 15 and 18. So there was a lot of space between PG and 15, wasn't there? And now you've got 12. So just left 12.
Yeah, you know, you still got 12, and, you know, obviously the most blockbuster stuff is, you know, is always going for that 12A to make sure as many people see it as possible. And as you say, that's what's changed. You know, back in
this was an 18, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, fully.
Yeah,
I think at one point, and they had to cut it back again. I think like all of Verhoeven's stuff, like he's known for term I hate, pushing the envelope. You know, really. Pushing to the extremes, and I think it is that part of that satirical edge of that whole thing of, you know, American consumerism, his European slant on what it should be, and the excessive makes it ridiculous. It's, you know, it's a current theme, you know, across this trilogy we're talking about. You know, you think about those the three things that tie them together, as well as sci-fi themes of Robocop, Total Recall, and Starship Troopers, is the excessive gore and satire. You know, it's all sort of one package.
Paul, do we really need to see this rod, like a shot of the rod protruding, like, you know, it's like that, you know, that Halloween or fancy dress costume that you have,
the arrow through the head.
Yeah, with the arrow going through his head. So, Paul, do we really need to see it? He's like, yes, it would be hilarious. Let's do it.
Well, that's it. That whole bit when he breaks out,
and it is like, hilarious.
It's like, could he not just like break his straps? No, he has to pull the thing off, which has a shard of metal, which he shoves through the guy's neck, and then another guy comes at him with an axe, and then another guy comes at him with a pole. He shoves it through his head. And it's just like, yeah, sure, why not?
I think as we talked about with Starship Troopers, he wants to push things to the limit. It's like, yeah, no, these aren't monsters and they're not bugs. There's real peril, and they're horrible, and they're going to dismember, and then it gets in the way, you know. And he pushes, turns it up to 11, you know.
Yeah, and in the point of Starship Troopers, you know, war isn't pretty. You know, it shouldn't be glamorized, but let's fill it full of beautiful people and murder them.
Where do we go from here, George? We've covered that's the production chat. We've covered our first memories.
Let's just talk about the movie. I mean,
so what are your favorite highlights? I mean, what's your I mean, the elephant in the room is, which we are going to dance around, is how much of it is the double agent, the dream sequence. Do you not think this is kind of by today's standards in terms of complexity? People look at Inception and say, oh, it's complicated. He's really challenging the audience. It's like this film, maybe it doesn't challenge the audience, but it can be interpreted a number of different ways.
Yeah, no, I totally understood it all when I was about 8 years old. Totally
three boobs. Got it.
Chick with 3 boobs. What is that a question, Charlie? Yeah, no, that's it. Like, it's a really enjoyable film on face value. In the same way that Starship Troopers is, but you delve into that next layer down of, and instead of satire, it's okay. Well, what's really going on? What is, and it, as you say, it perfectly encapsulates, whilst it's very different and probably really extreme, like, Philip K. Dick died quite early on, and so he wasn't around to see this film and to get his thoughts on it, but I think he would probably be a bit shocked by it. But it is, as you say, it's true to that sort of that paranoia, that playing with that perception of reality. 41 or 42, whatever scripts, later, they, obviously there's a lot of work gone into that script. It keeps you guessing, the fact that, it could be okay, well, he's one guy, he goes to the trip, and then that's it. That's his destiny. He's it's a bit like the thing that came to mind watching it this time is it's a bit like Born Identity. The fact that, who am I? Where I'm trying to remember who I am. Why am I such a badass? But that's quite a linear story of I have no memory. I'm just an unassuming guy, but I can see the guy, how much that guy weighs over there, and before my hands start to shake, that sort of stuff. Whereas this, it's okay, it's that, but it's then another layer behind that. It's like, okay, I'm somebody else, but then the person that I think I am is not that person. I've been double choked, but then this whole time, this could have all been a dream.
Because it starts with a scene that we're led to believe is explained to us it's through our eyes. It's a dream, and then at the end we see a very similar scene with the same two. Hauser, Quaid, and Melina. Is this a dream? I'm not sure if it's a dream. So I think that Philip K. Dick would be very happy with that. And I think, just to touch briefly on his novels, and we love his short stories, they all follow a similar path. It's like someone they're not sure of who they are, they don't know what it is, it reality, is it a dream, and all that. But the stories focus on how they can find out what the truth is. Are they nuts, or is it really happening? And I think that was a lot of what was going on in Philip K. Dick's head. Well, that's
it was there's the whole thing with Philip K. Dick was
I'm not crazy. Who you calling crazy? I'm not crazy.
I think people are after me. Don't be silly. They're not after you. It's all in your head. And then the final line, it wasn't in my head.
which is the, can you remember the brilliant short story? It's like, it just ends in that one line. But if he's on the rocket, that would mean I'm the robot and I'm the bomb. Boom. Story ends.
I think they made that into a film with Gary Sinise, and I think the film's called Imposter. And I think I can't remember what the actual short story's called, but yeah, it's a sort of the person you. But
that would mean that I'm the imposter.
Yeah, I'm the imposter with a bomb in my boom.
Story ends. Brilliant.
Yeah. So yeah, you like your sort of intelligent sci-fi.
They're short stories. They're easy to digest. And you can highly recommend them.
You can pick up these collections really cheaply on Amazon or paperback. I remember, like, around the time Minority Report came out, they released a bunch, because Minority Report's a short story, so they released a bunch of short stories with obviously Minority Report on the front cover. But yeah, if you like your sci-fi, your thinking man sci-fi in bite-sized form, check it out, because yeah, there's some crazy ideas there, and it's stuff that obviously, people keep coming back to. There's been, obviously we talked about Blade Runner, Minority Report, Total Recall.
iRobot was Arthur C. Clarke, though, wasn't it?
Yes, but you've also got Adjustment Bureau. That's Philip K. Dick. I think Paycheck.
Once again, wiping your memory.
I think Paycheck is a Philip K. Dick. That's not that good.
I like Paycheck.
It's so. I mean, it's.
You just don't like Affleck.
No, I know I have a lot of time for Affleck. I just think
it's John Woo.
It's John Woo. It's Affleck. It should be a lot better.
It also gives that guy who's very good in Batman and Thank You for Not Smoking.
Aaron Eckhart.
Yeah, so very much his breakout role. But yeah, no, in terms of, can we just talk about the style of this film? Because stylistically, it is a beautiful film, and you can see why it got both visual effects and just the scenery. It's such a good sci-fi film.
Well, no, that's it. So, a lot of the stuff before they get to Mars, that's all filmed around Mexico City. So apparently Quaid's apartment block, with all those different levels and walkways and stuff, that's a military academy in Mexico City. Wow. That was built at the time. And what they cleverly did, they did with all the sets around it. So for the recall officers, a lot of the stuff in Mexico City is made just using concrete. So concrete partitions. So they made sure all the sets replicated that to
everywhere,
continue that sort of futuristic look. And that's one of the things I love about this film is, and again, probably it does it even better in another adaptation, Minority Report. I just love the future tech. And it just the stuff that has no real relevance on the plot. So in this, obviously, there's the video wall when he's watching, again, the Verhoeven stuff of the news reports. There's the video phones. There's the Johnny cab. But also even just the minute stuff like the receptionist doing her nails.
Yeah, I love that.
And Verhoeven says in the commentary, he put all that stuff in, and a lot of it was his contribution, was to help sell in the idea of a dream, the fact that you could accept that, oh yeah, it's easy enough for me to get a memory implant. That the whole thing of, if it was too present day or too realistic, you'd be like, oh, well, that's what, you can just go into a place and get your memory wiped. No, that I'm not going to buy that. But it felt futuristic enough, but not too far futuristic.
No, I see what you're saying. It had to look a certain amount of... had to have a certain amount of future tech to make the whole recall thing believable. And I love it how, like in Starship Troopers, taking the metro is very scary. But just looking at that security system, how far off are we from that, George, in today's world? Traveling after lockdown, it's going to be X-ray scanners, just like that.
After recent events of what's happened in America, we are obviously recording in early January. I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be metal detectors in a lot more places and what have you. But
we remember that the fact that he had the gun on him and then he jumps through the glass. It's a great scene.
Again, it's this that those little moments that, as you say, stay in your memory of that whole thing with the X-ray screens, and you're like, oh well. Yeah, you go, when you go through the airport, you get, all those different scans and stuff, and why not? It's an acceptable kind of thing. And apparently, I think that was supposed to be done CGI, but then they couldn't get it to work out. So I think that was all done stop motion. So all the stuff with the skeletons was all hand animated.
Oh, wow. It does. It still looks good now. I thought that I wasn't sure if that's been touched up, but yeah, I liked the little Easter egg. Is it an Easter egg? The guy's name who runs Recall, Bob McLean. It's Carl McLean.
Well, that's it. It's IMDb stuff. There's the McLean, and then the fact that he uses an interactive touchscreen to find him. But I think that might be a coincidence. But we may as well.
It's so Robocop. It's so Starship Troopers.
I was going to say, we may as well, if we talked about McLean, we may as well talk about that scene, because it's such a pivotal scene in the film. The fact when he goes to Recall and McLean sells him the trip, and I love the guy that plays McLean. I don't think I've seen him in anything else. I listened to
anyone else.
But I listened to a podcast a few years ago with him on. Matt Gawley of James Bonding. He did a podcast where he interviewed people that played minor parts in films, and he interviewed that guy. So it was really interesting to get his insight on it. But he's so brilliant as, again, it's a little bit of that Bill Paxton, and they even say in the sort of behind the scenes, like they told him to play it as like a used car salesman, and he's such a salesman.
But I say I've written my notes. I'd be in too. This is one tempting offer, and for me as a sales guy, it's like it's a great pitch.
Well, that's it. He's like, oh yeah, you want, it's safer than air travel, and yeah, you want all this package, and then like, but are you interested in our ego trip package? And he's like,
can I just ask you one question?
Come on, don't bullshit me.
What is the same thing about every trip you've ever taken? Are you laying it on thick?
No, but the thing is, I remember, again, it's ironic playing like memories and stuff like that, but I remember the whole point of him going into Recall and describing the girl from his dreams that turns out to be Melina, who we've already seen in his dreams. I remember that. But the thing I must have picked up on before, but I don't remember, obviously it probably passed me by first time around, but the tech assistant picking up one of the slides and going, blue skies on Mars, that's a new one. And I like that must have gone over our heads so many times.
Yeah, so many times.
I mean, even though Doug McClane, or Mr. Spoiler, he tells you the plot, you get the girl, agents are after you, you save the planet. And this is something that Paul Verhoeven reinforces, like, he's telling you the plot. And then later on, with Dr. Egmar, the whole Matrix ripoff scene of take the red pill, you're actually back at Recall. You're, what's more believable? You're a construction worker at Recall, or you're a double agent that's saving the future of Mars and giving it air? Like he basically lays out the script as well, but because we're so involved, we're just like,
we don't care. We want Arnie's version.
Just shoot some more people. Get the hologram watch out. Where's Michael Ironside?
Oh, we haven't talked about Ironside.
We haven't talked about Michael Ironside. We haven't talked about the lovely Sharon Stone.
That Sharon Stone is she has got a gig for Alan Afloo, big opticians here. So her sunglasses, and she works for one of the big brands. I can't remember the sunglasses brand, but she really is, in the words of Alan Partridge, a 60-year-old scorcher. Still, what I'm saying, she still looks amazing today.
Well, no. Speaking of Partridge, like I couldn't help thinking of that. The early scenes where like I could pretend to be your wife, and the whole point of like in the Alan Partridge where he's got that actress as wife, and she just is like is completely repulsed by him. But it's the opposite with Sharon Stone. She's all over him, and I used to, and I still do, fancy the pants off Sharon Stone. But it's just like, oh my god, she's so hot. But it's just like
the pantsuit, the go-getting pantsuit. She's well dressed in this.
Well, she's fantastic in this, and obviously she would go on, 2 years later to do Basic Instinct with Verhoeven and become a star. Obviously this was her star-making turn. But she's fantastic in this.
She kicks ass.
And and I lost count. I was like, she's all over. She loves Doug. She almost loves him as much as she loves hitting him in the nuts.
she hits him about 3 times.
At least 3 times. There's a few times in that fight in the kitchen at their place. Yeah. And then later on, when she's on Mars, she stamps on his nuts. And
she's a real ball buster.
She's a real ball buster, but she's fantastic, and obviously I say it's a star-making turn for her. But she's also in league with when she calls for help, and my favourite entrance is there's a black screen, and then he suddenly turns around on the vidphone. It's fucking Michael Ironside.
What an arrival! Just the way he's so casual. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, I think he's playing a different role to what we see in his other films. And I remember this role as being different. He's very much I think we normally see him as being more authoritative in his other roles, whereas this he's Cohagen's hit guy.
He's the Pitbull.
Yeah, but he's brilliant. Just the way he knees that guy off Laurie when she's on the floor, and he just throws it. Don't you take your hands off her. And he doesn't care about shooting the glass, and he has that confrontation when of course he actually arrives, when Arnie turns up in drag at the Mars Customs. I think everyone knows that term, just the 2 weeks.
Sums it 2 weeks.
But George and I have used that to death through our entire lives. Like, if it ever comes up, it'll someone will say, how long? 2 weeks? Like, 2 weeks.
Yeah. And I think that's a trigger word we could say to either, James Glentoning, John Glentoning, or Jamie.
Absolutely.
And that would trigger the same reaction as well.
Doing the nervous smile afterwards especially helps.
Yes. No, I put that on our social channels, and it seemed to trigger quite a few people. And they even homage it in fairly unsuccessfully in the remake as well.
So what else do you want? I mean, in terms of I think this has the three set pieces. It's got the clever complexity. It's got a lot. I think the only question I'm asking myself is, do we remember all of these iconic scenes just because you and I have watched it a lot? And I don't think that's the case, because just doing a little bit of research the last few days, everyone agrees this is an amazing film.
Well, there's so much going on in terms of, there's so much we haven't talked about. So you've got the phenomenal score by Jerry Goldsmith, and we've talked about. And as soon as I put it on, I was like, yes, I'm watching this. And Jerry Goldsmith, we've chatted about him before, but he's a legendary.
Our mate Jezza.
He's a legendary composer. He did a lot of the Star Trek films. He did the original Planet of the Apes. He did the Rambo. We talked about him on Rambo. He did Alien, Air Force One. Again, we've talked about it. Gremlins. He's done so many film scores, and I think he considers this he's passed on now, but he considered it one of his best scores. It's got the whole sort of mew, 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 but it's got that bombastic, Paul Verhoeven, a bit like the Basil Polidoris score from Robocop. It's got that big bombastic score, but it's got that trippy sort of sci-fi sort of theme.
Well, very Blade Runner. That's why, just going back in terms of style, the fact that you've got, when you've got that spaceship turning around, it's all in red, all the scenes outside in red, it really captures what it must look like,
Some amazing, on that point, some amazing miniatures. We talk about our love of miniatures, and I think this is one of the we talked about, GoldenEye. I think GoldenEye was one of the last big films to use miniatures, but all the stuff
with the trains and the lifts going up and down, it's so intricate,
and the way the camera's looping around the walkway in the reactor hall. It's again coupled with Jerry Goldsmith's score, it's pure sci-fi for me. I love it.
No, I was just saying, I think it's very good how the third act does arrive, and how they bring in this story with the rebels, what was the plot and all of that. But what I think the film does very good throughout is I think it succeeds at being a great sci-fi film, at being an interesting, thought-provoking thriller, and being a brilliant action film. And I think it's difficult to do that, but the music from Jerry Goldsmith, as you say, the bombasticness, because this was pre-Terminator, but there's a bit of T2 going. Obviously this is after the first Terminator film. There's a bit of Terminator in there. It's that sort of the hard drum, but it's got the Blade Runner-y sequence, and with all the graphics and all the miniatures we're talking about. This is a brilliant sci-fi film. It wouldn't be what it is without Arnie, but maybe if I think if you put any other actor in, it would have been like a Blade Runner-y type film. But luckily, it's what it is.
Let's wait for Coulda, Woulda, Shoulda, Charlie. That's what I'm going to say. The other thing that we haven't really talked about is the makeup effects. So it's Rob Bottin, the guy who did The Thing. He did obviously a lot of stuff on Robocop as well. So there's all the mutant stuff that he did, but then there's all the stuff that you don't think about when, or that it's kind of obvious probably watching it now and probably was back in the day, but when Arnie's getting, the thing up the nose, the COVID test, when he's getting the bug out the nose, that's clearly obviously an animatronic of Arnie's head. And obviously there's the whole 2 weeks bit where with the head splitting open is fantastic, but the Arnie bit behind it looks a bit like Robert Palmer.
But it does look slightly dated now. I think I've put it in my notes now, just how many, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger is probably in the Guinness Book of Records. He's probably not, but he should be, for having the most amount of prosthetic heads of himself made. Because how many do you think exist? If you take into account this film,
all the Terminators.
they would have made 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5. Terminator 2, they went nuts because they had all the different versions, the degradation of his face throughout, and they were really getting into it then. So I'm guessing, can you imagine that there's 50 or 100 heads of Arnie around? But yeah, I did notice that going back to it.
Well, and obviously
it's still impressive.
There's the bit that, again, like, I remember us laughing about back in the day when we first watched it, and it's probably one of the few sort of weak points of the film is, I mean, it's an impressive effect, but the whole bit of them on suffocating on Mars, that's all animatronics, obviously, with the eyes bulging out. And this film, again, you're talking about how many things of Arnie's head. I think this film has the most amount of Arnie ADR, additional dialogue. So many gruntings and groanings that he's not on screen, like the stuff when he's at the start in the dream when he's falling down the hill, he's like, and then obviously when they're both gasping for air at the end, their eyes,
and his eyes are popping out. That's hilarious. It was back then. It's a bit long.
That's it. It's a bit long. It's a bit hilarious, and I think even Gary Goldman picked up on it and said they were so, like, they rushed, like, it was very much to the wire in terms of finishing the film and getting it into theaters. And I think they were, bizarrely, it shows like the state of cinema, or like what had the studio system. They were competing against the Dick Tracy movie, you know, the Warren Beatty Dick Tracy movie.
Yeah,
that was coming out the week after Total Recall, so they were like, we've got to get it done, we
can't miss our slot.
Yeah, and so as a result, they didn't test screen it. They just like, yeah, let's just go for it. And I think Gary Goldman said, yeah, me and Paul talked about it, like that last 20 minutes could have been tighter. It could have been edited a bit shorter. And I think that's it. It's like, it really does dwell on the...
And as for Cohagen, he gets the proper Raiders of the Lost Ark exploding Nazi death, doesn't he?
Come on, Cohagen, give those people the air.
Oh, brilliant. And I mean, there's so many things that we quote from this. Ronnie Cox, just him saying fuck him.
Well, and I just love that bit where Ronnie Cox is full Bond villain at the end, where where Quaid gets to the reactor handprint and he's like, don't fucking touch it. Don't do it.
You kill us all.
I'm going to blow your wall to get him cut.
He is brilliant in this, Ronnie Cox, because you're right. He is very Bond villain-esque in that he comes in, has that lovely chat with Richter, and he's just like, I've got this plan, I've got this, and you're fucking it up. And then he loses his shit, and it's okay, this is interesting. And he's sinister and go-to bad guy for that period.
Well, what I've put in my notes is Ronnie Cox upping his total bastard level from Robocop, because we really thought he was a shit in Robocop, but he really ups it in this.
Yeah.
The one thing we haven't really talked about, Charlie, is Quato. Quado. I'm going to say it in Arnie's voice, Quado.
Benny.
We haven't. Come on, man. We haven't really talked about the chick with 3 boobs, which is obviously one of the most important things to this film.
What is there to say?
Well, yeah, exactly. But
still looks good. Looks good now.
And to be fair, they get every penny they've invested in that prosthetic, because she is on screen at least 4 or 5 times. It's like, do you want to see them again? It's just like, it's almost like they're like, no, put him away, love. Put him away. It's like, yeah, come on.
Got the midget with the machine gun. It's brilliant.
Midget machine gun. But about Quato, so I've got questions. When does he eat? What, you know?
What does he eat?
What does he eat? Because he's got teeth. He's got teeth. He's got mouth. He's got hair. Does somebody cut his hair? When does that happen? Because it's all in secret, you know. I have so many questions. It's fantastic.
Does the host, how much, is the host completely out of it? Does he remember everything that's discussed when he's Quado? Because if he doesn't remember, then how does he know that he hasn't been like, Quado's been running the show and he's been like, he's been like that for 3 weeks, and Quado's been giving like campfire talks to reading everybody's mind at a party, and this guy's like out going,
Hang on, who moved my desk over there? But sir, Coulda agreed to it earlier. I didn't say. So yeah, I think we're getting on to that's one of my suspicious spin-offs later. But I have lots of questions about Coulda. But again, yeah, that's another fantastic. Well, I say it's a carryover from the David Cronenberg script, because that was all in the whole Quato and psychic and stuff. But amazing work from Rob Bottin with the prosthetics and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that's it. I think in terms of talking about the main film, it's I say it's a fantastic action film. Can't decide whether I love this more than RoboCop. I think I love the ideas more, the whole, the Philip K. Dickian ideas a bit more. Obviously, I'm a big Arnie fan. So yeah, there's a lot to love about this film, and I can understand. Yes, I could say you could probably tone down the violence, and it wouldn't take away much from the film, but it would make it obviously less of a Paul Verhoeven film.
You need to be reminded occasionally. I mean, I think
occasionally you just need to see somebody be used as a human shield on the metro.
Oh my god, yeah, because he's got the backpack, and the backpack's full of the squibs. It's got all the blood for the squibs. Remember, we worked this out, that the reason why he's able to get shot so many times in physical effects is because the guy's backpack is just full of blood squibs, and it's got all of the blood. It's just coming out of his chest. Okay, he's empty. Gonna have to throw him away now.
Apparently, like when a blood squib goes off, it's really painful. It's like being punched really hard in your chest. So I really feel for that guy. Yeah. He's just like, oh, Paul, no, please. Mr. Verhoeven, please stop.
No.
I didn't get it that time. We're going to have to go the squibs again. We're going to have to go over the squibs again.
Another round of squibs. It's just one every centimetre. But no, for me, I think, to be fair to both Mr. Verhoeven and his films, and I think it would be fair to say, George, that it is a case of diminishing returns from RoboCop to Total Recall, but I think Total Recall is propped up by the fact that it's got Arnie in it, and because it's a bit more modern, the special effects are more. But what I'm trying to say is, like, in terms of the originality and the Verhoevenness of that, and Peter Weller's performance and everything else.
Well, I say you get a lot of that stuff that's carried over the news reports, the adverts. That does feel like it's diminishing returns from RoboCop, but still, I say, brilliantly done. But yeah, as you say, RoboCop is as an original piece, I suppose.
But my overall point is that I'm talking about it from a trilogy that you go from. I mean, I love them all, but you go from RoboCop and it's like, wow. Total Recall is like, yes, this guy's amazing. And I just felt that by the time we got to Starship Troopers, like, it was almost like, oh, this is a look back at, remember Paul Verhoeven sci-fi films, how cool they were. Whereas I think you get both sides of it in these two films. So that's what, when you're trying to say, because I'm answering your query before, you're not sure which is your favorite of say these three that we've put together as a trilogy.
Oh, no, yeah, I mean, no, I would say it's between Total Recall or RoboCop. I mean, I love Starship Troopers, but I think, yeah, it's a really close tie for me between the first two.
Just why didn't they imagine if they put RoboCop and put them together even closer, tied them together for another film. But
which I've just remembered, I think Peter Weller's in a Philip K. Dick. I think Screamers is what, like, there's a lot
I have not seen that. I need to watch that.
Nah, don't bother.
Everyone says it's terrible, but the fact that it looked good, the trailer looked good when it came out, and it's Philip K. Dick, but it's terrible. Okay.
Yeah.
I like it then.
Yeah, maybe give it a go.
Hello dear listeners, Charlie McGee here. That ends the first part of our retro ramble on Paul Verhoeven's Total Recall. We don't normally split up our episodes, but as you can see, George and I have been rambling for almost an hour, and we've not even touched on the crazy ideas for the sequel, or any of our usual features. Be sure to get your ass to part 2, where George and I try to pin down the ambiguous plot, the suspicious spin-offs it could have led to, alternative casting in our Coulda, Woulda, Shoulda, and of course, some shout-outs from you, our dear audience. So thanks for listening, keep sharing. See you at the party, Richter.
There's a fat old lady, and I'm actually hiding underneath this thing, which is the amazing thing which we find out later on.
Go ahead.
I just want to say that now things are going wrong with the face. The uncontrollable distortion of the face and everything, and that's what busts me actually right now, because the face does not stop and it says the wrong things all the time. What a surprise, to come up there as an old lady, then all of a sudden the thing malfunctions and they catch me, and then of course this is not just a face or a head, it's also an explosive device.